Howdy and good morning, everyone. My name is Ashley Dean, and I'm a member of the Fighting Texas Aggies class of 2023. AAA, whoop! And I'm the Vice Chair of Development and Public Relations. Welcome to the 15th Annual Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Breakfast. Out of abundance of caution, we made some last-minute changes to our program today and have limited our in-person guests to 200 people. So I also welcome our virtual audience that is joining us this morning. I would like to take this time and thank you all for coming and showing your support not only to our organization, the MSC Woodson's Black Awareness Committee, but for commemorating Dr. King's holiday and being part of the conversation for holistic social equity and awareness. A bit of housekeeping for our in-person audience. Please make sure your cell phones are on silent, and as always, the views expressed at this program do not necessarily reflect those of the MSC WBAC, the Memorial Student Center, or Texas A&M University. MSC WBAC has a wonderful history, and we would like to honor those who have come before us. Those students in 1969 who formed the Committee on Black Student Affairs, BAC, who took charge of addressing issues directly affecting Black students as an ad hoc entity. And in 1970, the Students of Black Awareness Committee, BAC, which was a charter organization providing cultural programming for the entire university community. And in 2004, the Memorial Student Center reestablished our organization as the Dr. Carter G. Woodson's Black Awareness Committee, MSC WBAC, with additional and community building focus. The purpose of MSC WBAC is to enhance the understanding of the cultural contributions and impact on society of people of African descent by providing educational and community building programs and experiences for the Texas A&M University communities. We do this all through learning outcomes. 2, expose the campus community to educational programs related to Black culture, history, heritage, and the events throughout the African diaspora. To educate the campus community members by providing relevant programming, diverse perspectives, and engaging presenters about African American culture. Explore the ideals and issues germinated to Black people locally, regionally, and globally. Different iterations of this annual program occurred on campuses across the country. Typically, the MLK Breakfast served as a formal way to reflect on the life, legacy, and accomplishments of Dr. King at Texas A&M. Our hope is not to only honor Dr. King, but to also make his legacy relevant for the university and its students, faculty, administration, and staff. We hope to utilize the passion and experience associated with Dr. King, the civil rights movement, and other leaders of the past to inspire and foster a spirit of action in the leaders of today and tomorrow. Now please stand and we will sing the Negro National Anthem led by Voices of Praise, and after which Dr. Timothy Scott, Interim Provost and Executive Vice President of Texas A&M University, will give the opening remarks on behalf of the university.
Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring. Ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of our new day begun, let us march on till victory is won. Stony the road we trod, bitter the chastening rod, felt in the days when hope unborn had died, yet with a steady beat have not our weary feet come to the place for which our fathers sighed. We have come over a way that with tears has been watered. We have come treading our path through the blood of the slaughtered. Out from the gloomy past, till now we stand at last, where the white gleam of our bright star is cast. God of our weary years, God of our silent tears, Thou who hast brought us thus far on Thy way, Thou who hast by Thy might led us into the light, keep us forever in Thy path, we pray. Lest our feet stray from the places, our God, where we met Thee, lest our hearts, drunk with the wine of the world, we forget Thee. Shadowed beneath Thy hand, may we forever stand, true to our God, true to our native land.
Howdy. Dr. Sante, we say howdy here. It means you are part of the family. Welcome to the family. So let's say it again. Howdy. Howdy. It's great to be with you. Thank you, Voices of Praise Gospel Choir. It's a beautiful tribute to our black brothers and sisters that were brought to this country out of no choice of their own and have been left to find their own way. But they have done it, and they are doing it. And we come together this morning to celebrate that and recommit ourselves to the difficult work ahead. I want to thank the MSC Woodson Black Awareness Committee for organizing today's event, recognizing that planning an event in today's pandemic is anything but easy. So at a moment's notice, they flipped to provide social distancing, staged entry, and online options. I want to thank everyone who could join us this morning, either in person or online, as we celebrate and continue to honor the life and legacy of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and I, for one, cannot wait to hear from Dr. Asante. When I think about Dr. King, many things come to mind. The famous "I've Got a Dream" speech, his impact, really his shaping of American civil rights, his commitment to peaceful protest and to nonviolence, his Nobel Peace Prize, and all the values that he stood for. But if I had to pick one word or value to describe him that stands out to me, it would be unity. The coming together of people regardless of their differences. As Aggies, we relate to this. All people, regardless of race, creed, or color, are included in our core values of respect, excellence, leadership, loyalty, integrity, and selfless service. The moment a student joins Texas A&M, they immediately become part of our Aggie family, part of a unified group that should support one another. In addition, if our family's not big enough with 65,000 students on this campus, we have more than 500,000 former students across the world who also are committed to living out these values and supporting our university and our current students. So we are loyal to the university, we are loyal to our fellow Aggies. Aggies lead, we work hard to impact the world, and we serve the greater good. Something we must be reminded of. Not our own good, the greater good. Our values, therefore, are similar to those of Dr. King. And as we remember and celebrate him, it should motivate us to continue to come together in unity and to value our differences. Dr. King taught us that the democracy in which we live, it is important that we remain engaged and lead efforts towards positive change. We can all promote positive change through living out our core values. Let us remember this powerful and gifted man, be thankful for the many contributions he made, and recommit to living a life that makes a difference and positively impacts the world around us. May we continue to draw inspiration from him and continue to do the hard work that he began. We celebrate his courage, his commitment, his leadership to help advance this society. Thank you all for being here today and for your commitment to continue the good work of Dr. Martin Luther King.
Howdy. So thank you, Dr. Scott, for those words of inspire and charge us towards a better university. I am JJ, MSc WBAC's Village Director, and throughout the year, I'm the one who plans our Soulful Sunday dinners. A quick shout out to one of our breakfast sponsors, the African American Professionals Organizations here at Texas A&M, which I will partner with next year to get back to our roots with Soulful Sunday programming. But the task at hand is to introduce today's moderator, our very own Colonel Stephen Ruth, class of 1992. Colonel Stephen G. Ruth is our only African-American student body president from the Corps of Cadets. While a student at A&M, he was very active in student government, the MSC, and was awarded the Buck Wyrus Spirit Award. Colonel Ruth graduated with a Bachelor in Business degree in Management and commissioned into the Army as a second lieutenant of infantry. He went on to serve numerous tours to Balkans, Iraq, and Afghanistan. After getting his master's degree from George Mason University, he served as an assistant professor of leadership at West Point and returned to West Point to serve as the 26th Commandant of the United States Military Academy Preparatory School. He later became a fellow at Harvard's Kennedy School of Government. In May 2010, student leaders at A&M chose Colonel Ruth as the university's 2010 campus muster speaker, an honor he shared with former Defense Secretary Robert Gates in 2009 and Governor Rick Perry in 2002. During the conversation between our honored guest and Colonel Ruth, the audience will have an opportunity to submit questions via an online form. For our in-person audience, there are QR codes on the tables that link to the form, and for those attending virtually, please copy and paste the web link that is provided via the messaging in the Zoom seminar. Colonel Ruth will ask Dr. Sante a few of the audience's questions. So would you please join me in welcoming Colonel Stephen G. Ruth with a round of applause.
Good morning and howdy. Yeah, it's great to be back home and to see so many familiar faces. Some of y'all still here. Tom, how are you this morning? And it's great to be back home and really to see how here at Texas A&M how we continue to evolve and grow and become more inclusive. This Martin Luther King Breakfast looks much different than it did when I was a student 30 years ago, and I tell you that means it's progress, because there are other people that would naturally come to an event that's sponsored by the Black Awareness Committee, now the Woodson Black Awareness Committee, because I'm not black, and why would I be attending that event? Right now, what you are showing here, by testimony of your presence, that Texas A&M is evolving, and you recognize that there's things to learn that I may not have learned when I was growing up, things that I may not have learned through my tenure at Texas A&M, but I have the intellectual curiosity. I have the desire to understand. Because why? I know that my calling is to be a difference maker. And because to be a difference maker, I've got to understand the plight of the human condition. I've got to recognize that there's some things I don't know. There's some things about people and their cultures and backgrounds that I'm yet to learn and fully understand. And because of that, you all are here today. And I couldn't be more proud to be here as a moderator for this morning's ceremony, to see such a diverse audience for this event this morning. So again, thank you all for being here. So this morning we were just so blessed to have Dr. Sante here with us as we honor the legacy of Martin Luther King Jr. My mother was born in 1929, just a few months after Dr. King, and also committed her life to a lifetime of service, and shared stories about her life growing up in parallel to Dr. Martin Luther King. And so I was blessed to be able to grow up with one of his contemporaries, particularly as my mother and father for that matter. And so when I was a junior here for the Black Awareness Committee, I got a chance to go to Atlanta, Georgia, to the King Center for Nonviolent Social Change, and got to meet and have lunch with Coretta Scott King. A very formative event for me as a young student, a college student, to be able to have the opportunity to meet the King family and Martin Luther King III during that trip when I was a junior. And it helped shape and give me a perspective as I was growing up as a member of the Corps Cadets, obviously contracted and going into the military. It made me a better military officer because I understood a dimension of our society and how we help societies continue to evolve here in America, and even where else I would go, how to create that more perfect union. And this was so insightful for me to be able to take in some of the lessons and attempt to apply those in my everyday life. Well, this morning, again, we have this special opportunity to listen to the reflections and perspectives on Dr. King from Dr. MLK Sante. He was born in Valdosta, Georgia, of Sudanese, Nubian, and Nigerian Yoruba descent. His great-great-great-grandmother was enslaved in Georgia, and he is one of 16 children. He is married to Anna Yanega, an African Costa Rican with Akan ancestry, and from Jamaica. He earned his PhD from the University of California at Los Angeles, and at the age of 26, he was appointed full professor at the State University of New York at Buffalo. Dr. Sante is the founding and current editor of Journal of Black Studies and the first director of UCLA's Center for Afro-American Studies. Dr. Sante is often called the most prolific American scholar, has published 96 books. Among the most recent are Being Human Being, Transforming the Race Discourse, The Peerless Sinner, When Will the African Sinner Hold? Radical Insurgencies, The History of Africa, 3rd edition, An Afrocentric Pan-African Vision. I told you he's also been called the most prolific writer. May I continue? The African American People, A Global History, Erasing Racism, The Survival of the American Nation, Revolutionary Pedagogy, African American History, A Journal of Liberation, and the African American Pyramids of Knowledge. Dr. Sante has also published more than 500 articles and has been recognized as one of the top 10 most widely cited African American scholars, African scholars to be exact. He has been named a history maker with an interview in the Library of Congress. And in 2019, the National Communication Association named him an NCAA Distinguished Scholar, its highest honor. Dr. Sante has been appeared on numerous television and social media programs in Africa, Asia, North and South America, and Europe, and remains a high-demand consultant for many school districts that are seeking to build Afrocentric curricula. He has always said that a truly educated person is one who learns how to humanize the world. And Dr. Sante is currently the professor and chair of the Department of Africology at Temple University in Pennsylvania. And this morning, we will be getting to listen to him as our keynote, not necessarily a keynote speaker, but we're gonna have a dialogue. I've got some questions for him. We'll exchange in that dialogue and conversation. And I hope that that dialogue and conversation creates questions. And you have the QR codes there on the table, and those are online listening to us virtually. You have the links there to be able to input your questions. And then after the first 20 minutes, as we get going, we'll entertain the questions from the audience. We'll hope to get to as many questions from you as possible. But without further ado, please join me in welcoming Dr. Sante.
Howdy.
Thank you so much. It's so wonderful.
Howdy. Okay. I think I'm an Aggie. Okay. Okay. Excellent. So, do I start or you start?
As the moderator, he will take the liberties of asking the first question and we'll
All
engage
right.
the dialogue.
Okay, thank you.
So again, welcome, Dr. Sante. We're so blessed to have you here with us. You know, as I read your bio to the audience and everything, you have such a very, very deep sense of appreciation for African history and African American history in all your studies and writings. Would you enlighten us from that perspective, from all your research, what is Martin Luther King's place in American history?
Thank you very much for that question. Martin Luther King's place is perhaps at the very peak of America's social and cultural history. I don't think that there is any person that I could place as a moral leader in this nation at his level. And that is a magnificent thing, given the fact that he was only 26 years old when he began his quest for what was considered to be, at the time, civil rights for African Americans in Montgomery. And I just want to pause here for a minute, because sometimes when we talk about King, we forget that there were other people with him, and we don't bring them along with him. And that is largely because of the singularity of his eloquence and the outstanding courage that he demonstrated. But along with him, I always like to mention, when I speak about this, of Fred Gray, And very few people know. How many people here have ever heard the name Fred Gray? Okay, there are 3 or 4 or 5. Okay, excellent. Fred Gray was only 26 as well. He was the attorney that got King out of prison in Alabama. And they were both in Montgomery at the same time. In fact, there is a large museum in honor of Fred Gray at Tuskegee, because he was, of course, one of the great civil rights attorneys at that time. But he had just come to the same city as King, and he was, of course, King's right-hand attorney. And they were both 26 years of age. When I think about that, I think, wow, 26, and they were fighting this struggle. They were not 36 or 46 or 56. They were 26 years old. But the vision was incredible. So I see Martin Luther King Jr. In terms of America's history as a great moral leader. And I would say that if I speak of Mandela for South Africa, for example, or Mother Teresa, I would put him in that category as well.
I thank you for just extending the impact that he had from a moral perspective, and those others that recognized the march that he had, the vision that he had, the passion he had for social change that joined beside him. And sometimes it's good to mention those other folks on your left and right that have been helping you in that journey and that cause. Thank you for sharing that with us. From your perspective, how did the civil rights movement change America?
Colonel, let me just put it this way. I think that if we had not had the civil rights movement itself, we would still not be where we should be. We're not where we should be right now, but we are much farther along than we would have been had we not had that movement. And there are several reasons for that. As I think about it, the civil rights movement was very short. I mean, if you look back at history, it was, barely 13 years. 13 years, think of that. For me, at my age, I think 13 years, is a short period of time. 13 years is what we call the civil rights movement. Of course, the Reconstruction after the Civil War was also just 13 years. So 13 years, that's what you have to look at. And if we had not had the civil rights movement, we would not have been moving toward what I would call the human rights movement. And I think that is the value of the civil rights movement, because King's idea, along with the ideas of those people who were with him and who were in other movements that in many senses were movements that urged and egged the movement of the civil rights movement forward. Because if you didn't have those movements, then there were many things that would not have happened. We would not have had the Black Power movement. We would not have had the Black Arts movement. We wouldn't have even had the student movement that started at Berkeley. We wouldn't have had that, because I think that the civil rights movement set the tone that there was something that needed to be discussed and needed to be dealt with in the American society. So I think that it changed us because it made us a more critical society. I don't know, that word critical down in Texas may not be a good word. I don't know, but it is a good word. It's a very powerful word, because it allowed us for the first time to really talk about what is the history of this nation. I was just talking with J earlier, and I was telling him, I said, here, Texas, when I come to Texas, just like when I travel throughout the country, I always think of the indigenous people. I think of the people who were here, whose blood and shed on this ground before we were here, 1,000 years ago. None of us, we were not represented here. This is the land of the Comanche. I think about that. I think about it when I'm in Pennsylvania. There's the Lenape people that lived in Philadelphia before there was a Philadelphia, you see? So I think when I say critical thinking, I think what the civil rights did for us was to say, let's question who we are as a people, as a nation. And Martin Luther King Jr. could do this by virtue of his strong commitment that he knew that the African American was not just an inferior person or a being or a people. He knew that. And he understood that all African Americans, even at that time, even if they felt that the society had been arrayed against them, they felt very strongly that we are just as human as anybody else, and we're just as good as anybody else. But the white society didn't feel that way. And King changed that for many people in this society. Not for everybody, but he changed it for many. And that was a good thing, because what it meant was that we would get back to trying to understand I used to ask my students, how did African Americans get here? Neither my white students nor my black students knew. They said, well, we came in slavery. So where did they come from? Who are we? Who's the African American? I see the African American. Who are these people? What nation did they come from? Africa is not a nation. It's a continent. The most diverse continent on the face of the earth. Over 3,000 languages are spoken in Africa. Who are these people in the United States? What ethnic communities did they come from, nations in Africa? What languages did they speak? What songs did they sing? What are their proverbs? What's their philosophy? What's their most beautiful colors? Who are these people? King knew that the Africans were human and had been reduced by this notion of patriarchy and hierarchy to a whole different classification. And it's not difference that was the problem, and the civil rights movement pointed that out. It's not different. We are different. But it was not the difference that was the problem. Since Homo sapiens began, and Homo sapiens began where? Africa, the continent of Africa. All 7 billion people in the world today are Africans. Your genetic origin is Africa. Everybody in here. That's what science says, and I believe in science. I don't have a problem with science. So if that's the case, and we got the fact that Homo sapiens lived in Africa 3/4 of the time that Homo sapiens have been on the earth. That's like, wow, 3/4 of that time. I mean, Homo sapiens, we haven't been around. We were not here when the dinosaurs were here. I mean, sometimes people think, well, we were here with the dinosaurs. No, we were not here. They left about 70 million years ago. So they were gone a long time ago. Homo sapiens rise about 300,000 years ago. And until 60,000 years ago, all Homo sapiens on the earth were in Africa. Now, did the Homo sapiens in Africa recognize difference? Yes. There were tall people and short people. There were light complexioned people and dark complexioned people. There were people with blue eyes and people with blonde hair in Africa. So did they recognize difference? Yes. But what's the difference? They did not rank difference. Europe ranked difference. The Hindu ranked difference after the invasion of India. The Brahmins ranked difference with the Varnas and the caste systems. But Africans didn't rank difference. The tallest people in the world are the Tutsi. The shortest people in the world are the Twa. They both live in Africa. And nobody ranked difference. But the ranking of difference is what the civil rights helped us to deal with. That, wait a minute, I mean, I grew up in, the Colonel mentioned, I grew up in Valdosta, Georgia. When I was growing up, black people could not drive tractors if they were building roads, because white people thought the black people didn't have the ability to drive a tractor. Did any black people feel that way? No. White people felt that black people couldn't be quarterbacks of football teams. There was a whole period of time that you had no black quarterbacks. When you had a black quarterback, it was like, oh, wow, there's a black quarterback. There's a black pitcher for a baseball team. Do black people feel they couldn't be a pitcher for a baseball team? No. Because white people ranked difference. Civil rights movement intervened in that. And so we began to say, oh, well, everybody's human. And this is what has to be broken down continually. You see this whole question of a hierarchy. And the first hierarchy is real patriarchy. The domination of women by men creates all of these other hierarchies. You got to rank you, got to put you in your place, and this is your place, and this is my place. And when it doesn't work, it drives people crazy. It's like, he doesn't think that I'm superior? No, I don't think that. She doesn't think that I'm superior? No, she doesn't think that. That's what civil rights did. It pushed us to think these thoughts and to raise these questions. I'm sorry to go so long with that, but go right ahead, Colonel.
No, that was actually one of my very proudest, very, very deep questions that I had prepared. It's been all night coming up with that one. So thank you for indulging me with a very, very complete
you
answer.
asked good questions.
Yeah. I think that it's so important, particularly in a university setting, how we are charged to think, think deeply, think critically, and for our analytical skills, our adaptive thinking skills. I think our employers expect us to graduate from here and come into the job force with the capacity to think and to solve known and unknown problems. And in a social context, to be able to understand more deeply of how we can be effective leaders in leading a diverse population, because that is the nature of the population that we will be leading. All of our students will be charged to lead.
That's right. Absolutely.
That it compels us to be able to think and to understand how, if a person may grow up without an identity, what are some of the struggles that they may encounter because they just may not know who they are and they may be lost?
I think that's a very profound statement. I really do. I think that that knowledge itself is one of the most significant things that we can have in terms of relationship with each other, you know? The last trip I took before COVID was in February, almost a year ago. No, more than a year ago now, 2 years. I went to, I was invited to Moscow. And Moscow's in the news these days, I see. But I was invited to Moscow to the Academy of Sciences, the Russian Academy of Sciences, to talk about Afrocentricity, which is one of the theories that I speak about when I talk about African culture. And while I was there, I was fortunate, in terms of talking about knowledge, I was fortunate because a few years earlier, I had been asked to speak at a university in Halifax, Nova Scotia, on Alexander Pushkin. So knowing Pushkin was so significant to me when I was in Russia, because the intellectual and literary giant of the Russian people is a black man by the name of Pushkin. Most people don't know that. I knew that. It gave me a wonderful way to deal with the Russian population. And if you go to Moscow, one of the large, maybe the largest statue in Moscow is of a black man, Alexander Pushkin. So Pushkin, that whole relationship of Pushkin, who was, of course, from Ethiopia, his ancestors were Ethiopian, was so powerful and palpable that one could understand why Paul Robeson felt comfortable, because Pushkin was, in many ways, a literary giant, as Paul Robeson had been a cultural giant for the African-American population, and then, of course, for the world. I mean, the same sort of feeling that one has. So this notion of knowledge of what is, that's why it's wonderful when I came here and I met Jay and Matthew and Ashley, the people from the Woodson organization. It was very, very powerful because Woodson himself was like this. Most people don't know, when we say Woodson, Carter G. Woodson was one of the people who influenced by his work Martin Luther King Jr. Martin Luther King Jr. had many influences. Sometimes people say Gandhi, but Gandhi was only influential in one way, and that was the tactic of nonviolence. But his philosophical work was largely influenced by people like Howard Thurman, who probably people don't know, Benjamin Mays. These were people who had great influences on Martin Luther King Jr. Martin Luther King Jr. was very young, 16, when he went to college. So he had those influences as well, but it was knowledge that he was seeking. And in seeking this knowledge, he recognized that something is wrong. You cannot have a society that is based on this notion of superiority and inferiority. It's not good in the long run. I was just, as I was talking to Jay, I was telling Jay earlier, I said, Jay, when I'm in Texas, and I said, I have a house in Dallas. I live between Dallas and Philadelphia. And I bought the house in Dallas about 6 years ago. But people say, you're going to move to, because, in Northeasterners, you know how we do. You're going to move to Texas? I said, yeah, I'm going to go to Texas. I got a lot of family in Texas. I'm going to go to Texas, right? I have a house in Texas, right? So, but moving to Texas, then that's how I learned about the Comanche, because I want to know who are the people here. But I was telling Jay, I said, Jay, did you not know that the Alamo was in Texas, but it was also in Mexico? And I said, did you not know why Santa Anna came up here? And people in Texas a lot of people don't know that Santa Anna crossed the river to prevent slavery from being in Mexico. Did y'all know that? Yeah, y'all know it. A lot of people know it, right? Y'all in Texas. The reason Santa Anna came from, the Mexico government sent Santa Anna to San Antonio was because Austin wanted to bring Africans some of them already here, come over from Louisiana, bring Africans into Texas, which was a part of Mexico, which had outlawed slavery in 1829. And you know who the president was of Mexico? And who was the first black president in the Americas? It was not Obama. First black president in North America was Vicente Guerrero, an Afro-Indian, a black man. He's the one that outlawed slavery in Mexico. And the white people wanted to bring it back to Mexico. And he said, Santa Anna come up and said, no, you can't do that. It's outlawed. Of course, they lost, and they lost half of their country. But this is a story. That's a fact. You're not doing anything but raising a critical question. That's not critical race. It's a critical question. Facts. And we have to be human enough to recognize the complexities of humanity and the complexities of relationships. It is not about hating and loving. It's about this is knowledge. It's useful for making decisions and understanding human beings. Because otherwise we don't know why human beings, one of the issues, I'm not going to get deep into this, but one of the issues, no, but my wife and I were talking about this yesterday. We were talking about the issue with the Russian and the Ukraine situation. And we have friends who are Ukrainians and we have friends who are Russian. Listen, people don't realize there are Russians. There's 17% of the population of Ukraine is Russian, all right? About 4 or 5% of the Russian population is Ukrainian. So you got those dynamics, as well as the dynamics of, well, do they want Ukraine to be in the NATO? Or there are many dynamics here. And life is not that simple, that we can do this and they can. No, what are the dynamics that are going on here? And that's the question that we have to ask always ourselves in a society that is moving. I believe this society is moving more and more toward what I consider the recognition of humanity. That's the beauty of America. I think that the optimism that I have about the American society is because I believe that we are really, in a Sankofa way, retrieving, going back to the sense that humans had, Homo sapiens had at the beginning, and that is the values of what we call ma'at, M-A-A-T, ma'at. That was the first system of virtues in the world. Ma'at, the moral ideal that the Africans had, which was based on truth, justice, righteousness, order, balance, harmony, and reciprocity. Those, and that's what King was seeking. Let's go back to a time of Ma'at, where we try to hold back chaos. And we hold back chaos once we have knowledge and facts and we do critical thinking about things. We look at, how do we get harmony? How do we get order? How do we get balance? How do we get truth? How do we get justice? How do we get righteousness? How do we show reciprocity between people? These were the central ideas. And I think that is where we enter with the notion of knowledge.
That's just so fascinating to have a session and a conversation that finds its way into educating us about things that we thought we already knew, and then we only find how little we actually knew. That was even in the context of Texas history. I didn't come here this morning thinking I was going to get lectured on Texas history and found out that I need to go back to find my 7th grade teacher and said, hey, what's up, man? It's not what we talked about.
No, I know that...
David Jennings, I'm going to write his name down. I'll find him on LinkedIn and go ask him about that today.
Well, hopefully I can have some influence on Dr. Scott to really get that African American Studies department going here. Yeah. That would be great. They tried that for years at Texas A&M. And I was here before, many years ago, when the great giant, in many ways, Joe Fagan, was here, and I hope he's still here. I understand that he's here. Was in sociology, and we were always talking about, that Texas A&M really needs to have an African American Studies department and major. We at Temple, we have had a department since the 60s, and we had our PhD program since 1988, and we've graduated 180 PhDs in African American Studies. They're all over the world: China, Japan, Netherlands, Germany, all over Africa. This is because we believe in that. That's essential, and essential to teach people, because otherwise people don't know. People think they know African Americans, but most people don't know. There were over 300 different African ethnic groups that were brought from Africa. 16% of the Africans who are in the United States, their DNA is traced to Cameroon, not to Nigeria, Ghana. People say Nigeria and Ghana because that's where English is spoken. But no, but 16% of all African Americans' identity, according to AfricanAncestry.com, 16% are traced to Cameroon. It's a very, very complex situation with African Americans. And then you got the African American, Native American mixture, African American, European American mixture, African American, Asian American mixtures. All this is in the African American population, quintessential American population. But it's very, very important that we have some understanding of these complexities. Otherwise, we miss it. Yeah. I'm sorry.
No, with this audience, I know that we're simulcast to perhaps thousands, but the book that I'm writing is Keys to Leadership, Unlocking the Human Potential.
Yes.
One of the keys on that key ring needs to understand the depths and complexity of those in which you intend to lead.
That's right.
And if you're missing some of it's called the loopers in there that allow you to unlock it, then you're probably gonna not be able to unlock the fullest of that potential, because you're not able to draw from the strength of the soul of a person, but just because they don't know who they are and they don't know what capacity they have to give. That's a very, very complex piece of the human dimension.
Colonel, your book is going to be great, and it's because it's a powerful thought, and it's a correct thought. That's the key, but it's not just the leadership, it's the key to teaching. It's the key to teaching. People sometimes ask me, well, what about, how does it go with teaching? With teaching, you always are teaching people. It's not just you're teaching your subject. Sometimes teachers say, well, I know my subject. But no. That's not enough to be a teacher. You haven't taught until a student has learned, number one. So you're teaching people. So you got to know them. I remember teaching a whole class of mainly Vietnamese students at Temple University in Philadelphia on third world politics in the summer. And they came up to me, a couple of students afterwards, and said, how did you know such and such? And I said, because I have Vietnamese students in my class. So I went and read Vietnamese history. They want to know, how did I know about the Trong sisters? Because I used the Trong sisters as an example in class. I said, Joan of Arc, like Harriet Tubman, like the Trong sisters. And they said, Prof, how do you know about the Trong sisters? I said, because I knew you guys were in the class. I know my students. How do I teach you where you get the information? It's because I know I know how to be a good teacher. And to be a good leader, you have to have the keys that Colonel Ruth is talking about. I mean, that's important to have those hooks.
We have a few questions that have already come in from the audience. You know, one of our values here at Texas A&M is to actually develop leaders of character dedicated to do a greater good. With that in mind, what advice do you have to our students to help them imagine themselves as leaders for the next generation of struggle, whether it be for human rights or whatever field they go into?
The first thing is to know yourself. Truly know yourself. And what I mean by that is not know how tall you are or but to really understand yourself as much as you can in terms of what you would like to do and how you would like to relate to other people, and what your mission is in your mind, what you think your mission is. And I was just thinking earlier that I think the earlier you get your mission, the better it is for you. I have a couple of students that are lost. I mean, basically because they waited too late to really settle on what their mission. They didn't know, and they couldn't find anything that they felt they were comfortable with. And so, and some of these students that I know are in my own family, because you work with them and you say, wow, why is he taking so long to get it together? I mean, come on. I mean, there are people who, at 13 and 14, they got a clear idea. They got passion. I mean, what is it? And sometimes it's just that people have not been exposed enough to different things. You have to expose young people to many things so that they see that there are many options out there.
There's another question that came in. This is supposed to be somewhat an educational experience for us to engage with you like that. The question here was, can you speak about the miseducation of Dr. King's famous quote, judging others by the content of our character rather than the color of our skin, where certain people want to use it to prevent this discussion of history, particularly here in America?
I think it's a very, it's a very powerful quote, and that's why people use it. And it's almost like the Bible. People use Bible passages. You can prove anything, any side you want. You can take this and prove it. So content of our character is like that. I always say that's a good quote, but what is important, I think, is that the notion of the judging people by the content of their character has to have certain prerequisites. And one of those prerequisites, in terms of how you relate to human beings, is really what I call accepting and understanding facts. Like I heard recently a big conversation, and I think it was here in Texas. This was on the news. Sitting in Philadelphia, listening to the news somewhere near Dallas, they were having a conversation about the Holocaust. And someone said, well, if you're going to talk about the Holocaust, you have to present the other side. And I'm like saying, what? Did I hear that correctly? That there is another side to the Holocaust? There is no other side. There really isn't any other side that you can raise about that. So you have, and I think that what we got into in this country is something that I still feel as a communicator and a communication person is that maybe the communication field may lead this, and I think it's really, really bad. Because I was a debater when I was in college, and we used to debate. You can debate either side. You can take the negative or you can take the positive. You take either side. And we got to the point where we believed that things were morally the same. You can take that side, or you can take that side. And that's in America's, that's part of our DNA as a culture. So that there's one side and then there's another side. That's not always going to give you the truth that way. And that whole dialectic is not right. There are certain things that are morally not correct. And I think that we have to be able to say that. And there are certain things that you should not be able to say, well, there's another side of it if it's a factual situation. I mean, the facts speak for themselves. So the content of one's character is an important statement. I believe that your character certainly should be used to evaluate and judge whether or not, as a human being, you are a good human being doing what you ought to be doing, or relating the way you should be relating. But I don't think that you should get rid of all the other stuff. I rather keep the other stuff, the bad stuff, and then say, okay, but it's now the content of the character. In other words, you can't be a racist and then say, but it's the content of your character. No, you can't. You stop. I mean, if you say let's judge somebody by the content of their character, it means that I can maintain my racism. No, I don't think that's good. I don't think that's possible. I don't think King meant that. And I think that that's a misuse of King. And I think that we have to be very careful about that. Because first of all, as I said, the original Homo sapiens never had that notion of superiority, inferiority by how people looked. They never made that judgment. They never made a judgment based on the ranking of Homo sapiens. They made their judgments, if they made judgments, on what people do and how people behave. I mean, and that's a better judgment. And that's the content of character that I'm talking about. And it's not this whole notion of patriarchy or hierarchy that people have in trying to make judgments on that basis. basis of gender or basis of, a person's class background or creed or color or anything like that.
Another question from one of our students was, do you think that Dr. King's teachings would have been as impactful if they were not based on Christianity? If he were not a minister attempting to live his life as someone with that moral foundation? Would the civil rights movement have been successful without that moral underpinning?
I think it was useful that he had the Christian background because of the United States of America. And I think that was valuable. But I don't think that the arguments that he made were necessarily tied to a particular religion. In other words, it's like someone to say, well, would he have been successful if he had been a Muslim? Or had he been, a Jew? Or had his arguments been made by Hindu or Buddhist? Now, I think that the moral content could have been separate from a cultural religious content. In other words, religion is a culture as well. And I think he was correct to use the Christian religion as his cultural route to it, because that's what the American society was. We're a Christian nation in a sense. And so he used those things that Christians could relate to and refer to. But I think that the idea of humanity, that we're all humans, you can do that and you can make that argument even as an atheist. What is to say, why aren't we all human? Why is one human considered better than the other? And I don't think that Christianity should be laden only with the burden of being the religion that brought about the notions of superiority and inferiority, by the way. I wouldn't put that only on Christianity. But it was useful for King, given the fact that Christians say they believe this, for him to use it. But they are not the only ones. The Muslims also enslaved people from Africa. And they did that from the 9th century, this era. One of the first slave revolts in history is 900 AD. And that's the Africans revolted in Baghdad with what was called the Zanj Rebellion in 900 AD. So Islam itself had that problem with Africa, you see. So Christians later had that problem as well, the Europeans. So it's almost like, the very origin of us is African, but the people who left Africa and went to other places developed other kinds of relationships. And then over the centuries, we saw them come back and take Africans to different parts of the world.
A follow-up question from our students in the current generation of emerging leaders, being in the middle of a social shift of values focused on equity and unity, that's receiving a lot of backlash, even on a national scale. What advice would you offer to our student leaders, particularly future leaders for our state and country, in navigating these controversial and challenging spaces where their ideas may not be accepted?
Well, one of the things I think, Colonel, that I heard you say, and I think it's correct, is that the leadership really is, in this society, is going to be one that's going to be about diversity. You're going to have a diverse group of people that you're going to have to lead. So if you're going to have a diverse group of people that you're going to have to lead, you have to learn something about the people you're leading. That's what I would do. That's what I've tried to teach my children. The world is much more, first of all, the world is much more diverse than we can sometimes see from our own home. We have to understand that not only is it diverse, that our competition is not just in the United States. Our competition is with the Chinese and the Japanese and the Russians and everybody else, the whole world. It's a complicated world. There's a lot of people. So who are the leaders? How do we create these leaders who are going to be leaders in every context? And you have to have people who are open to new ideas and to advance new ideas. One of the most wonderful things, in a way, that happened, I think, to the African-American population, and is that the African-American population in this country has received a large influx of Africans from all over the world. So we got Africans from Cameroon, from Nigeria, from Ethiopia, from Haiti, from Jamaica, from Trinidad, from Brazil, from Colombia. They all live in the African-American communities around the country. What does that mean? It means incredible art and music, incredible science and imagination because of the complexity of the mixtures of all these rhythms and cultures going on in the African-American community. 1 out of every 10 African-Americans is now born somewhere else. That's how diverse the African-American population has become. There are 40,000 or 50,000 Nigerians living in Houston right over here. That's a pretty sizable population, you see. So there are many things going through the mind in terms of how we talk about leadership. So leadership is, you got to think for the future. What's the vision for the future? We will not have an all black this or all white this. It will not happen like that. It won't be that way, not in America. And of course, some Americans are distressed by that. I'm not distressed. I'm happy about it. I'm saying, wow, I can't wait until we have a true society that is truly multiracial, multicultural, and people are loving each other because they all believe in the same values. Or have similar values, I should say. That's where we're going. There's nothing wrong with that. That's human.
I mean, I think that's a really profound way for us to be able to look at how we can embrace what's ahead of us. How would you characterize the future to King's philosophy for continuing gaining those equal rights and breaking down those barriers, whether it be segregation or advancing the opportunity for black and brown people?
I don't think that the future is in the tactics, particularly the nonviolent movement, and that I don't think I don't see that future, because I think that we're past the stage where we have segregation, where you have to break down the barriers of segregation. I mean, when we're sitting in at the lunch counters and things like that, I don't think that I don't think that those tactics are necessary at this point. I think what is more powerful and more difficult and more nuanced is how do we gain not social justice, but how do we gain cultural justice? How do I also project with a degree of fluidity and also a degree of generosity, my acceptance of cultures other than my own. That is the new, that to me is the different thing. It is, if I live in this society, can I live in this society and say, you know what, that's not my style, but I don't have a problem with that style. That's a human style that comes out of somebody else's history and culture. Wonderful. I applaud that, you see. And of course, it may be my style tomorrow. I may like your style and want to do your style. I tell you this story. I've had 3 debates with Cornel West over the years, right? And we had a debate in the United Theological Seminary in Ohio. And if anybody, you've seen Cornel West, he loves his 3-piece suit with his vest and everything. And that particular day, I deliberately chose my 3-piece akbara from Yoruba. And if you've seen the huge akbara, 3 pieces, all you know, so it was a great contrast. And the audience was 300 black ministers, people training to be ministers. They were so enthralled and they saw the distinction because I said, yes, and Cornel West here, you can see him, he's dressed up in his European outfit with all of his stuff, and you can see who the African is here on this stage, right? So, and it was a very, very big, but I told him later on, I could sometimes wear the 3-piece. I understood that. But I just wanted the audience to see, here's someone who is a master at European philosophy. He knows nothing about African philosophy. But how can you do that? How can you say about anything about philosophy and you never read an African philosopher? You never even studied African philosophy? You don't even know what African philosophy is? But you can quote every European philosopher. That's poor education. And no, and it is true, but it's not, we all have had poor education. Poor education. You don't even believe there are African philosophers. So I told him, I said, how could you not do Imhotep, Amenemhat, Amenemope, Dwarf, even Akhenaten? Why can't you quote from them? Only you know Socrates and Plato. But you know nothing about African philosophers who lived before those people, who in fact taught the Greeks. Who taught Thales, the first Greek philosopher? Where did he go to school? He tells you. He says he studied in Africa with a priest. Not only did he study, but Pythagoras, the second Greek philosopher, studied in Africa. Who are these philosophers in Africa? So anyway, but the question I'm just raising is that, yes, you've got to know a lot of stuff. And you've got to be open to all possibilities. Because if you never know the name Imhotep, for example, I need to just say this. This is education. This is a little piece on education. And King would have appreciated it, I think, by now. Here's the thing. The pyramids were built 2,500 years before Jesus Christ. 2,500 years before Jesus Christ. Pyramids were built in Africa by black people. 2,500 years before Jesus. When Jesus was born, he could look back and say, wow, they got some old monuments down there in Africa. 2005, that's longer than it's been from Jesus to us now. It's 2,200. 2,500 years before him. They built the pyramids. Who was the builder of the first pyramid? Imhotep. Why we don't know it? A black man built the first pyramid, the Saqqara pyramid. Why we don't know it? You know what I'm saying? It's like, whoa, the builder of the first pyramid. And if you go and you see it, you're amazed. And we're still amazed. People still go and amazed. I take people year after year to Egypt. We sail up the Nile. And you say, wow, people they have no knowledge. So I always tell people the first knowledge ought to be as far back as we can go, who are the multi-geniuses who laid the foundations for modern civilization? And there were Nile Valley civilizations, Nubia, Kush, Meroe, Aksum, Kemet. These were the civilizations. What was their philosophy? That's why I have a book called The Egyptian Philosophers. One of my earlier books called The Egyptian Philosophers, because it was about who these people are, who taught the Greeks. You know when the Greek civilization rises? This is all free here. You know, the Greek with Homer. And Homer lives about 800 years before Jesus. The Iliad and the Odyssey, 800 BC. But by then, you had already had 3 golden eras in Kemet, in the civilization of Kemet. But anyway, that's how I see it. But King would have understood this because he was, of course, interested in philosophy and knowledge, but he died when he was 39. Thank you.
I think those are just so wonderfully insightful. And for our audience today, I mentioned in my opening comments, I mean, just how wonderfully diverse this audience is.
Yes,
I think
beautiful.
it's probably one of the most diverse audiences you probably have gone and speak to about this subject.
It's very beautiful.
And so just a round of applause to the audience for yourselves,
Thank you,
for
thank
even
you.
being here this morning.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
You've opened the aperture for all of us to really appreciate why education is important, particularly knowing a little bit more about history in a more broader sense. And you've added a chapter in my book for the leadership keys, unlocking the human potential, because that knowledge, particularly about some African history, that can be the key that unlocks a little black kid that's lost his way because he doesn't see how he fits into this world.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Doesn't know his history.
Yes.
So
absolutely.
believes he has no future.
Absolutely.
And the study of this only adds leadership keys to everyone in this room
Yes.
that
Yes,
had
you do.
an extra key on that ring
Yes.
to unlock the potential of a fellow student, a fellow employee, a future employee, or even a boss for that matter.
Sure.
And I think that's very, very powerful.
Thank you very much.
And to say it in such a way, with the grace that I think we all have learned to understand and believe how Martin Luther King lived his life.
Yes.
This, I hope that everyone in the audience found this to be somewhat provocative, but learning and broadening and opening our apertures. And no one should be leaving here feeling guilty or feeling like someone shamed them.
No.
Because education is education. It's learning, and everybody should embrace the learning process.
Sure.
Because that's who we are. And then we're a university, and we're a learning organization.
Thank
so if you would all join me with another round of applause for Dr. Sante.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Awesome.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks.
Matthew?
Can we give another round of applause to our moderator and our speaker on today? So, howdy. Oh, we can do better than that. This is Texas A&M. No, I'm getting on the stage. If you know my presence, you know how I'm coming. So, howdy. That sounds better. I am Matthew B. Francis Jr., the chair for the MSC, Dr. Carter G. Woodson Black Awareness Committee. I don't even begin to know what to say. So happy to see everyone here. I know last year we weren't able to have this in person, but just to have just as many people that are here today, I'm excited. I thank you all for being here. I thank you to our speaker, Dr. Sante. I thank you, Colonel Ruth. I'm honored to have you both here sharing with us on today. Wow, this is so amazing. Like I'm really am speechless because just last year I was thinking, what if we never are able to have this in person again while I'm here? But to see everyone here today, it's like, wow, this is so amazing. I'm gonna try to do this without crying because I'm like, wow, this is just, I'm in awe right now. But again, thank you all once again for being here. I hope you all really learned something. I know I learned a lot. I was taking me some notes as I was sending questions because I was like, oh, let me make sure I take this to class. So if I hear anything, I could just go ahead. Wait, actually, I learned this at the breakfast. But as we close this, although we made a last-minute pivot with the delivery of today's program, we hope that both our in-person and our virtual audiences have enjoyed the program to the fullest and garnered real value from it. I am so proud of my team for their fortitude to push through. As we close this morning, I would like to acknowledge our campus and our business partners. But before I give my thank yous to everyone, for our in-person audience, please look at the programs that you have on your tables to see a QR code that's on there. We ask that you please fill out the survey. And for our virtual audiences, the survey link is tx.ag/survey MLK. They'll also be posting that in the chat function of the webinar as well. We appreciate your attendance, whether in person or virtually, and want to know how to improve this program for the future years to come. As we wrap up our time today, it is only with the financial support of our campus and business partners that this program is made possible. I would like to acknowledge publicly and thank the Office of the President, Office of the Vice President for Student Affairs, Memorial Student Center Student Programs Office, Human Resources and Organizational Effectiveness, College of Education and Human Development, Texas A&M Athletics, Launch, the Bush School of Government and Public Service, Office of the Dean of Faculties, College of Architecture, Recreational Sports, Africana Studies, College of Liberal Arts, Melbourne G. Glasscock Center for Humanities Research, African American Professionals Organization, and Aggie Land Credit Union. It is bittersweet that we come to the conclusion of the program because of all the hard work and eagerness of our participants. So for the leadership team, I'm gonna ask y'all to stand so we can also recognize y'all as well. So to my leadership team, Mr. J.J. Torres, I think he walked out the door, Adasia Williams, Ashley Dean, Christiana Salone, Kendrea Murphy, and the rest of the staff rest of our members who are working with us today too, Mr. George Haas and also Bethany and Kevin. Thank you all so much for all that you've done. We couldn't have done it without you. Y'all are amazing. I love you all. Oh my gosh. Oh, y'all can have a seat. Also to our program participants, the Voices of Praise Gospel Choir, Dr. Timothy Scott, Colonel Stephen Ruth, and Dr. Malefe Sante. Thank y'all so much for all that you do to continue the work that you all are been doing for Texas A&M University and also to discourse on race and racism. And also those behind the scenes, our amazing advisor, Ms. Melanie Pearl. I see that's all her coworkers right there. Just y'all are amazing and we love you. Anna from Chartwells, Doug and Houston, and Casey and Texas Filmworks, Susan Fox Forrester from Student Life Studies. So please make sure y'all do the survey. She spent a lot of time working on this, so please make sure y'all fill that survey out. Thank you so much. With that being said, once again, I thank you all so much for being here on today. We are the change that we want to see. We are the future of this discourse. We are the reason why this work continues to happen. Stay true to the work that you are doing. Thank you all for being here today. And that concludes our 15th annual Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Breakfast. Thank you and have a blessed day.